So you want to break into the tech industry. So you want to break into coding. You want to be an engineer. You want to make a little bit more money. You want to live in the big city. You want your family to have nicer things. You want to go on vacations. You want to go to nice dinners. I get it. I get it. I wanted the same exact things. And maybe you've already tried starting coding a little bit. Maybe you've watch the videos that say learn Python, learn Java, learn JavaScript, learn HTML, learn Go, learn all these different technologies. And honestly, you're probably feeling a little more confused than when you just started. Maybe that's the case for you. Maybe it isn't. That was the case for me. I would watch the videos. I saw the gurus out there telling you to learn this, learn that, and I was confused. I felt more confused months after I started than the day I picked it up for the first time. So in this video, I'm going to talk about exactly why you should ditch Python and Java in favor of what I'm going to talk about in this video if your goal is simply to break into tech and start earning as quickly as possible. All right. So if you don't know me, my name is Jake. I'm an ex-Amazon engineer, and now I'm working as a full stack developer. All right. So I've worked on several different things so far in my career, from automating business processes to standing up a microservice for Amazon to then running conversion rate optimization. And more recently, working as a full stack developer to build out an internal SaaS, or not even internal SaaS, a consumer SaaS product. What we're going to talk about in this video is exactly what I would learn if I was just trying to break into tech as quickly as possible. All right. And so to do that, let me first tell you about what I was first taught. All right. So let me just go ahead and draw this here. This is going to be our analogy for this is you, this is me. And our goal here is to get to the money. All right, so this is the money. This is the moolah. All right, so we're going to draw a bag. Excuse my bad drawing skills, but just imagine this is a bag and this is you getting that fat paycheck that you are after. So our goal is ultimately to get our little guy or our little girl or woman or whatever over to this bag. All right, we want to make the money and we want the shortest path possible. All right, and so I'll tell you the route that I took. And in hindsight, the way I would have gone looking back on it, right? So when I first started learning, I was first exposed to coding in high school, right? Where I learned some very basic HTML and CSS. This was a web development class. Okay. So I learned how to put pixels on the screen. I learned about the box model. I learned about moving stuff around the screen a little bit, styling it, putting different fonts on the text or whatever. I learned the basics of web development. And honestly, that was pretty valuable. And then after that, I actually had a drag and drop programming class. I think it was called robotics or something. This was basically drag and drop programming. There was no writing code. It was literally like dragging puzzle pieces across the screen. Right. So we'll call it robotics. And I'm going to put that in parentheses because it wasn't even really coding, but it was programming. And that's kind of what I'll get to in this video as well. So let me put an asterisk on this. It's not really programming, but it is programming in many ways, right? So after that, I went to college. I kind of forgot about coding for a while. I didn't do it for a while until I went to my first coding class in college, which was basically Python 101. All right. So that was not the name of the exact class, but that was what I was first exposed to in college. Right. And so in this class, we talked about conditionals. We talked about for loops, while loops, file input, outputs, some of the basics like that, maps, arrays, some of the different data structures and stuff. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. Just know that Python was kind of the first language that I was exposed to. And it's not a bad step. It's not a bad language to learn. I feel like most developers will end up touching Python at some point in their careers, but that was kind of the first thing I learned here after HTML and CSS. And so after Python, I began learning Java. All right. So this was more college courses, they taught in Java. And the reason they taught in Java was so that you can start to understand object-oriented programming. You could start to understand typing, different data structures and different algorithms, so on and so forth. So I learned Java next. And that was kind of the path here that I learned, right, in the quote unquote professional environment. And, as I was going to school for this, I was paying a lot of money to go to school to actually have them teach me these things. I learned these things in school, and what ended up happening was I used Python a little bit. So I'm going to draw the divider here. I used Python a little bit on the job on my first internship, and then I used React, and then I used a little bit of Python. And bear with me here. I'm going to explain exactly why I'm talking about all these things here. And then it was all HTML, CSS, and then basically JavaScript. All right. And so it comes in all flavors, Vue, React, what have you. At the end of the day, if you're a developer, you're going to be able to figure these things out, and I wouldn't worry too much about it. All right. So, all right. And so here is the point. I would say, me personally, I felt like I was starting to make decent money right around here and here. Okay, so let's look at this path here. So we went from HTML and CSS to drag and drop programming to Python to Java. And this was the classroom side. This is what I started getting paid for. Python, React, Python. And then this was my first full-time role. Everything after here was full-time and beyond, right? So this was the first time that I started making six figures, okay? And so I put all this stuff on the screen to kind of show you the journey of, I started with HTML and CSS. And what's funny is I pretty much ended with HTML and CSS. And mind you, I never learned JavaScript in school. I had to learn this outside of school. I went to a public university where I studied quote unquote computer science for 4 years. And if you're trying to break into tech, don't worry, you don't need a degree. You can absolutely learn the skills outside of college. But what's funny is like the skills I actually use on the job, I had to teach myself not only on the job, but outside of the classroom, outside of the job. And that should be very encouraging for you. If you're trying to break into the industry and you didn't necessarily study computer science or you didn't get all the internships or whatever, you can do this, all right? And you can acquire the skills, right? If you're willing to put in the effort and willing to actually learn, you can do this. And that's what I want to talk about right now. So if we want to go straight to the money here, here's what I do. I would take this step. Learn your basic HTML and CSS. Be able to put pixels on the screen. Be able to move boxes around the screen, to style it, to change the text, change the font. It's just going to teach you, it ends up teaching you a lot more about programming because you can understand it intuitively, all right? When you are say learning coding in a classroom or learning coding from a textbook, to me, it was always very abstract. It was always difficult to learn because it was hard to conceptualize when you don't have live examples reacting to your data, reacting to your input, whatever you're clicking on the screen in real time. The nice thing about HTML and CSS, you can change a color and immediately see the effects it has on the screen. You can immediately see what is actually responding to what you're changing on the page, right? So first thing I would learn is HTML and CSS. We can kind of break that into two things right there. So we can call that learn HTML and learn some CSS. Learn some CSS there. Okay. Moving on here, we had robotics, we had Python, we had Java, and then so on and so forth. One thing I didn't learn in school was this boy right here, this bad boy right here, JavaScript. I think in 2025, JavaScript is hands down probably the single most valuable skill or language that you can have experience with, say web development. And it's because there's just so many jobs, that are one in web development and two require JavaScript. I mean, basically any kind of web developer role, you're writing some form of JavaScript, and that may be React, that may be Vue, that may be another front-end framework or even back-end framework, right? If you're writing node code, whatever, it doesn't matter. But there's just so many different jobs in there. And that's why I'd say, it's like if I was trying to break into tech for the first time, that is exactly where I would put my time. I'd put my time into HTML and CSS. I would learn some basic JavaScript. I'd learn the basics. You don't have to be a master of React and Vue. And to be quite honest, right, if you're interviewing for a new role, right, if you're trying to break into tech, like they're not going to be asking you about the inner details of React. They're not going to be asking you about the inner details of Vue. That's why there's senior engineers. That's why there's people that are experts at this. At whatever place you're going to go, they don't expect you to be a master of it, right? They expect you to be able to solve problems and get better and ship code, but like you don't need to be a master when you come into these places, right? So these are the three languages that, I would start with, if I was trying to shortcut my path here. And I put an asterisk up here on the robotics thing. The reality is when you don't yet know how to code, when you're not yet an engineer, you think that learning the quote unquote language is all that there is, right? Now I got to learn this language, now I got to learn that language and that and that and that. What you realize is that engineering, that coding, is just a big set. It's a big series of basically patterns. All right. So you learn how to write if statements. You learn how to write conditionals, for loops, file input output. You learn how to use an API. You learn all these different patterns, right? And each language kind of just reuses those patterns in different ways. They all solve the same problem, but in different ways. Some are optimized for memory, some are optimized for speed, some are optimized for not breaking, some are optimized for beginners so that, you can write across the entire tech stack in the same language or whatever, right? So that's what I will say. If you want the languages specifically to learn to go ahead and break into tech, that's where I would start. And again, if you are able to master the basics, if you are able to put in the work, if you're willing and able to actually learn, you can absolutely do this without a degree. You don't need to go to a top school. You don't need to have a top internship. internship, all you have to be willing to do is actually learn the skills, apply yourself, and put yourself out into the real world, and you too can break into the industry, start earning whatever it is you want to be. Again, thank you for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one. If you are wanting to break into tech, I've included a link down below in the description. Go ahead and book on a call to speak with me directly. I will share exactly what it is you need to go to the next level, to break into tech, whatever it is you want. If that means working with me, if that means me pointing you to another resource that's going to help you out, we will get you to where you want to go. All right. So thank you for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.